Am I the a-hole for keeping the property after my wife inherited $12 million dollars and left me high and dry? So here's a bit of background. I, 38M, have been married to Elara, 36F, for 13 years. We met in college, got married right after graduation, and like most people, thought we'd just build our life together slowly. We didn't come from money, and neither of us had family that was particularly well off. We were both used to working hard and living modestly. A couple of years ago, Alara's dad passed away unexpectedly. He wasn't in perfect health, but no one expected him to go so suddenly. The funeral was rough, of course, and we were all grieving. But when the will was read, things took a very unexpected turn. Her dad, despite not being wealthy when he died, had somehow managed to accrue about $12 million dollars in assets through savvy investments, an inheritance of his own, and some unexpected real estate deals. I had no idea this was even possible because her dad had always seemed like your average middle-class guy. But apparently, he'd been playing the long game. To my surprise, Elara inherited all of it. Now, I want to stress that I wasn't expecting anything from this. I'm not some gold digger or anything like that. We were comfortable enough, and Elara and I had always agreed that money would never be a source of tension in our relationship. But when she inherited all this money, things started to change, and not in a good way. It started small. Elara became distant, less affectionate. She began spending more time on her own, and I noticed her having secretive conversations on the phone. At first, I thought it was just the grief from losing her dad, and maybe I was overthinking it. But then, after a few months, she told me she wanted to sell the house we bought together when we got married. The one we had put years of work into, the place we dreamed of making into a family home. She said it didn't feel like us anymore and that she needed a change. I was honestly blindsided. She mentioned moving into something smaller and more modern, maybe even a place in the city, closer to her friends and new business ventures she was starting. But I was against the idea. I was attached to this home, and it was the one thing in my life I felt truly stable in. I didn't want to leave it behind just because we could afford something fancier. At this point, her attitude had become more cold and calculating, and it felt like the money was shifting something deep inside her. She wasn't the same person anymore. One night, after a particularly tense conversation about the house, she flat out told me that I wasn't cut out for the life she envisioned for herself going forward, that I was holding her back, and that she was thinking about separating. I was devastated. This was my wife, the woman I had built my life with. I thought we were on the same page. We'd always worked together, planned together. But it seemed like money had changed everything. Not sure what exactly triggered it, but when she started discussing the future, it became clear to me that her priorities had shifted. She was planning on taking the money and running in a way I didn't understand. She made it clear that she didn't want to share the inheritance. In fact, she told me she was planning on getting a divorce and that I wouldn't be entitled to any of the inheritance, including the house. So, after a lot of thought, I did something that might seem extreme. I decided that if she wanted to leave me, she could, but she wasn't taking the house with her. I knew that in our state, I had some legal right to the property since we'd bought it together, and I wasn't about to let her just walk away with it, especially considering how much time and effort I had put into making it our home. I began talking to lawyers to protect my stake in the property. When Elara found out, she was furious. She accused me of trying to control her and manipulate her into staying in the marriage. But to me, it wasn't about controlling her. It was about protecting what I had worked for. The house was more than just a building. It was where I had put down roots, where I had memories with her. It wasn't about the money. It was about the principle of it. Then, my family got involved. My parents, who have always been tight with Elara's family, were divided. My mom and dad sided with me, saying I had a right to keep the property if she was planning to leave. But Elara's mom and brother were furious with me, calling me selfish and accusing me of trying to ruin Elara's new life. They said that I should have just let her go, that I shouldn't be holding her back from her future. I tried to explain that it wasn't about holding her back. It was about protecting what I had invested in. But they wouldn't hear it. So, after Elara found out about my plan to protect my stake in the house, things went from bad to worse. We had a huge argument, and it wasn't just the usual tension that had been building up. She accused me of being greedy and resentful toward her newfound wealth. She said that I had always been comfortable with less, and now that she had money, I was suddenly all about protecting what was rightfully hers. The way she spoke about the inheritance made me feel like a stranger was speaking to me. She had always been so down to earth, humble even. And now, with this wealth, she had become someone I barely recognized. Elara started talking more about how she deserved to have the freedom to live her life as she saw fit, without being tied down by the past. It felt like she was treating me as though I was somehow an anchor to her new vision of herself. I tried to explain how hurtful it was, how I didn't care about the money but just wanted us to be together. But it felt like nothing I said mattered. She seemed more interested in finding a new life for herself than in holding on to what we had built. The emotional distance between us just kept growing. But it wasn't just her. Once Elara told her family what was happening, it felt like the whole world was turning against me. Her brother, Mark, who I had always been close with, called me one night, furious. He told me that I was being childish and immature, that I needed to let her go and move on. He said that the house didn't matter anymore because Elara could give me more than just a home. She could give me everything. But to me, the house wasn't just a material possession. It was a symbol of everything we'd been through together. Elara's mom, Helen, was even worse. She was incredibly upset with me, saying that I was ruining Elara's happiness and that I was acting out of spite. She told me that I needed to accept the new reality and stop trying to keep Elara tied to the past. She kept going on about how much Elara had sacrificed for our marriage, and that now it was her time to do things for herself. I tried to explain that I wasn't trying to hold her back, but rather I was standing up for what I had worked for too. But Helen wasn't listening, and my own parents, on the other hand, were more sympathetic. They tried to stay neutral at first, but when I told them how Elara had been treating me, they said they understood why I was doing what I was doing. My mom, especially, was furious that Elara had started distancing herself from me, saying that it didn't matter how much money you had. You should always respect the person you shared your life with. But even my parents weren't willing to get fully involved in the conflict. They didn't want to see our marriage implode, and I don't blame them. They've always believed in family unity, and this situation was tearing us all apart. Meanwhile, my friends were divided too. Some thought I was doing the right thing, holding on to the house, standing my ground. Others thought I was being ridiculous and didn't understand why I couldn't just let Elara have her new life. I felt like no one could see where I was coming from. It was like everyone was focused on the money and not on the fact that this was tearing apart a marriage that had lasted over a decade. I wasn't even sure where we stood anymore. But there was something else. As time went on, I started to notice that the tension wasn't just about the house or the money. Elara seemed genuinely uncomfortable around me. She stopped making the effort to talk things out, to listen to me. It was like she had already decided that she was done with our life together. I felt like I was losing her, piece by piece, and I didn't know what to do about it. The more I held on to the house, the more it seemed like it was driving us further apart. I still didn't want to give up on our marriage, though. Part of me kept hoping that if I just stuck with it, if I fought for the home that we'd built, things might get better. But Elara's behavior started getting more erratic. She made it clear that she was no longer interested in trying to fix things. She started going out more, spending time with new people, and it felt like she was living two separate lives. The one with me, where she was growing increasingly distant, and the one with her new friends and business partners, where she seemed so alive, so empowered. One evening, she came home late, and I had just come back from speaking with my lawyer. I was drained, emotionally and physically. I was trying to get a clearer picture of what my rights were in this situation. Elara walked in and immediately noticed the paperwork I had laid out on the kitchen table. She glanced at it, then looked at me with a cold expression, saying, "Are you really going to drag this out? Are you really going to make me fight for everything?" Her tone was icy. It stung. I tried to stay calm, but I could feel the tears welling up. I had never imagined that our relationship would come to this. I told her that it wasn't about fighting. It was about protecting the life we had shared. She cut me off, telling me that I was living in the past and that she was done with this conversation. She walked out again, leaving me standing there feeling like everything I had worked for was slipping through my fingers. At this point, I started questioning everything. Had I made a mistake in trying to hold on to the house? Was I truly fighting for the right reasons? But part of me still felt justified. It wasn't about the house, the money, or the inheritance. It was about respect. I couldn't just let her walk away with everything. But I also couldn't shake the feeling that by holding on to the house, I was just prolonging the inevitable. Update. It's been a few more weeks since I last wrote this post, and I've been going back and forth on everything. I think the reality is hitting me hard now. Elara and I are officially living separate lives, even though we're still technically married. The emotional toll this has taken on me is immense. I'm physically drained, emotionally wrecked, and mentally exhausted. I never expected my life to turn out like this. And the worst part is that I don't even know who I'm supposed to be anymore. I've been talking to my lawyer almost every week, trying to figure out how to protect the property. We've discussed several options, including negotiating with Elara to reach some kind of agreement, but the problem is she's not interested in talking anymore. She's gotten a lawyer of her own, and from what I gather, she's determined to take the house and everything else, regardless of how long we've been married or the life we built. The more she pushes for this, the more I start questioning if I'm doing the right thing by not just walking away from the house and all of it. I've also tried reaching out to her family, hoping someone would intervene, but it feels like the lines are already drawn. Her brother, Mark, told me that I was being too proud and that I needed to swallow my pride if I wanted a chance at salvaging things. He said, "You're not going to win, and you're going to lose her forever if you keep this up." I didn't take it well, but honestly, I'm starting to wonder if he's right. I don't want to lose Elara completely, but it's getting harder to see how I can get through to her when she's so set on this new version of herself. Her mom, Helen, still calls me, but she only ever seems to want to tell me what I'm doing wrong. She keeps saying that I need to respect Elara's choices and stop fighting her. But how am I supposed to respect someone who's willing to tear everything we've built apart over money? I'm frustrated, hurt, and so confused about where to go from here. I'm not sure if I'm being too stubborn about the house or if I'm just trying to hold on to the only thing that still feels like it belongs to me. And then there's the guilt. I keep hearing my friends' voices in my head. Some of them think I'm right to fight for the house. Others think I should have just walked away from this long ago. There are nights where I wonder if I'm just holding on to my pride, or if I'm genuinely standing up for something important. I keep asking myself, if the roles were reversed, would Elara have fought for me like this? Would she have cared about the home we built, or would she have just moved on with her new life? A part of me still believes that the house is worth fighting for. It's more than a material possession to me. It's where we started, where we made memories, and I think I deserve some recognition for all the hard work I put in. But another part of me wonders if I'm just dragging things out because I'm terrified of losing her completely. I'm not sure what I want anymore. Elara and I don't even speak much now unless we have to, and even then, it's barely civil. She's practically a stranger to me. One thing I'm sure of is that everything's changed. My relationship with her family, especially with her mom and brother, feels irreparably damaged. They've made it clear where their loyalty lies, and it's not with me. And while I'm not asking for their support, It stings to know that I've lost not just my wife, but the family I thought I had a strong bond with. At the same time, I can't help but feel bitter toward them, especially Mark, who's so ready to paint me as the villain. But then, late one night, something unexpected happened. Elara came to the house. I hadn't seen her in days. She stood in the doorway, hesitating for a moment before she spoke. "I think we need to talk," she said, her voice sounding less confident than I'd ever heard it before. I didn't know what to expect. My heart was racing, unsure whether this was going to be the final conversation that ended everything or if it was a last-ditch effort to salvage what was left of our marriage. We sat down in the living room, our living room, and for the first time in what felt like forever, it was just the two of us, like it used to be. She told me that things hadn't been easy for her. She was dealing with a lot of pressure from her family, from her new lifestyle, and from the weight of the inheritance. But she also admitted that she had been wrong to shut me out the way she had. There was this crack in her voice, something I hadn't heard in weeks, maybe months. For a brief moment, it felt like the woman I married was back, the one who I could talk to without feeling like we were on opposite sides of a battle. "I don't know what I want anymore," she said, looking down at her hands. "Everything's changed so fast, and I'm just not sure who I am anymore, or who we are." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I thought I had lost her forever. But now, sitting here with her, it was clear that she was struggling just as much as I was. Still, the issue with the house was looming over us. "I don't want to fight you," I said quietly, "but I can't let go of everything we've built, not without a real conversation. I don't know if I can just walk away from this." She nodded slowly, her eyes filled with exhaustion. "I don't want to lose you either, but I don't know how to fix this either. I can't go back to who I was, and I'm afraid I've changed in a way I can't undo." And maybe we both have. We sat there in silence for a long time, both of us trying to figure out if there was a way forward. I don't know what this conversation will lead to, but for the first time in weeks, I felt like there was a possibility of us finding a way through this. The conversation with Elara didn't lead to any immediate resolution, but it did open a small door. We agreed to take a break from talking about the house, to just focus on us for a while, though even then, it wasn't easy to let go of everything else. The tension was still there, lingering in the background, but something about her vulnerability, the cracks I saw in her armor, made me think there was still hope. The following week was an emotional roller coaster. I spent a lot of time reflecting on everything we'd been through and what had really changed. Elara had always been so driven, but the power of the inheritance seemed to be warping her into someone new, someone I couldn't quite grasp anymore. But I was realizing that I wasn't the same person either. I had changed too, through all of this. The bitterness, the feelings of betrayal, the fear of losing everything. It had hardened me in ways I hadn't expected. I had been so focused on the house, on the idea of holding on to the one thing that felt like mine, that I hadn't given enough thought to how it was affecting me emotionally. Maybe I was losing myself in this fight. Elara reached out again a few days later, and this time, the tone was different. She was more open, less defensive. She admitted that her feelings were all over the place. It wasn't just the inheritance. It was the sudden freedom and pressure that came with it. She said she felt like she was drowning in expectations, her family's expectations, her own expectations, and even my expectations. "I never wanted to hurt you," she said quietly, "but I don't know how to make things right. The money, it changed everything, but I didn't want to change us." I heard the hurt in her voice, the sadness that mirrored my own. Maybe we hadn't communicated as clearly as we thought all these years. Maybe we had both been so caught up in our own lives, our own desires, that we hadn't seen what the other needed. Alara's realization didn't take away the hurt I felt from everything that had happened, but it did make me wonder if maybe, just maybe, there was a way to find our way back to each other. But even as we spoke about our feelings, The issue of the house still loomed between us. We both knew it was a sticking point, and neither of us was ready to just let go. The idea of selling it and splitting everything felt like a betrayal to me. Something about that just didn't sit right. For Elara, it was more about her future, her independence. She wanted to build something new, something that was hers. I understood that, but I also needed her to understand that I couldn't just walk away from a place that had been our home for so long. We decided to go to couples therapy. It felt like the last resort, something we should have done much earlier, but I guess neither of us had ever really known how bad things had gotten until they were almost beyond repair. The first few sessions were awkward. Elara and I were both guarded, unsure of what the therapist would say or whether it was even worth trying. I could tell she was struggling to express herself fully, just as I was. But with time, things started to shift. We both began to open up in ways we hadn't before. The therapist, who was incredibly patient, helped us untangle the mess of emotions, money, expectations, and resentment that had built up between us. It wasn't easy, but for the first time in weeks, I felt like we were working towards something. Elara admitted that she didn't want to lose me, but she also didn't want to feel trapped in a life she couldn't control anymore. She said that the inheritance had made her realize how much she had been relying on the comfort zone of our life together, and she didn't know if she could go back to just being us in the same way. "I love you, but I need to know who I am without all of this," she said, gesturing to the world of money and possibility that had opened up to her. "I'm scared that I've lost myself in all this." It was a powerful moment. I realized that I hadn't really considered her perspective. For so long, I had been so focused on my own hurt and anger that I hadn't stopped to think about what Elara might be going through. This wealth had changed the way she saw herself, and she was struggling to reconcile who she used to be with who she was becoming on the other hand. I couldn't ignore how much this situation had changed me, too. The way I saw her, the way I saw myself, it was all different now. I was still hurt, still upset, but I was starting to wonder if there was a way to find peace with the changes. I didn't want to lose her, but I also didn't want to give up everything I had worked for. The house was more than just bricks and mortar. It represented the life I had built with her, the memories, the dreams that we didn't reach a conclusion in that first session, or even in the second. It became clear that there wasn't going to be an easy answer. There was no simple solution to the mess we had created. But there was something that kept pushing us forward, the willingness to try. Neither of us was ready to give up on the marriage completely, even though it was hard to figure out where to go next. Over the next few weeks, we had more long talks, sometimes productive, sometimes not. But the therapist kept guiding us back to the same core issue: trust. We had to rebuild trust in each other, trust in ourselves, and trust in the relationship. We couldn't move forward until we could do that. And that included talking about the house again. "I'm not ready to let go of this house, but I don't want it to be a symbol of everything that's gone wrong," I admitted to her one night, my voice soft. "I want to rebuild things, but I can't do it if we're still stuck in this." Elara nodded. She didn't have an answer, but I could see the conflict in her eyes. I wasn't sure what was next. We were both still working through everything, and I knew there were no guarantees. But for the first time in a long while, it felt like there was a possibility, a chance that we could find our way back to each other, to a new life, even if it didn't look like the one we had planned. After weeks of therapy, a lot of soul-searching, and several long, painful conversations, Elara and I have reached a sort of truce. I can't say we're out of the woods yet, but we're talking again, really talking. Not just about the house, but about the future, about us. We've agreed to take a step back from all the pressure, from her inheritance, from the house, and just try to rebuild what's left of our relationship before anything else. I'm starting to realize that the house isn't worth destroying everything we've built. Maybe I was holding on to it too tightly out of fear, out of pride, or maybe because I thought it was the one thing I had left that was truly mine. But it's clear now that it's just a house, and a home is something much bigger. As for Elara, she's agreed to let me have some time to figure things out, to settle into a new normal before we talk about what comes next. We're not rushing into any decisions. We're just trying to find our way again, piece by piece. So, after everything that's happened, I'm left wondering, am I the a-hole for holding on to the house when I could have just walked away for the sake of my marriage, or was I justified in fighting for what I thought was mine? Should I have just let it go? Or am I still in the right for wanting to keep it? If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more about how Elara and Dominic navigate their complicated marriage, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. What do you think? Was Dominic right to fight for the house? Or should he have let it go for the sake of their relationship? Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this.